be very careful if you're an athlete or a former athlete who's become a coach or everything. Pull away from the idea that you identify as what you did.
Mm.
As a Baltimore Raven fan, you'll love this. So Chuck Noll, head coach of the Steelers in the 70s and early 80s, he would bring players in when it was time. So we're talking about future Hall of Famers. He would bring them into his office and when it was time to stop, and he would say, listen, you need to move on with your life's work.
Wow.
Football doesn't define you. You need to, you can't play anymore. So after, 11 years of playing, you need to go to your life's work. The sport you play is not your life's work. And so a lot of coaches will roll into, say, the Parisi Speed School, and they'll say, I'm a football player. I'm a basketball player. You're not. You're a coach. Like, start to think like that, as opposed to identifying yourself as this, because you'll be very sad and very depressed if you just continuously identify as something you once were.
We believe that you are strong by design, and you were made in God's image to have a strong body, mind, and spirit. You're listening to the #1 strength and health authority podcast in the world. So let's get ready to unlock your potential and transform your life in today's episode.
Hi, friends. Welcome to the Strong by Design podcast. I'm your host, Joe Miller, aka Joe Animal. You are in for a big and exciting dose of motivation and inspiration today. We have the incredibly motivating elite coach, Eric Mitchell, joining us for a powerful conversation. You don't want to miss this. Thank you for taking time out of your busy day to join us. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe, like, comment, leave a review. That really helps spread the message. More people will hear about it and be blessed by it with you doing that. If you have any issues doing that, please send a message to us and we can help you figure that whole process out. Eric, thank you so much for joining us today. How you doing? That's my Rocky impression. How you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm a Philly guy. Even though I'm a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, I'm a Philly guy. So we're doing great. It's all good.
Nice. I wanted to do the Rocky impression because of the whole Philly thing. And also, you are so incredibly inspiring and motivating. You're a modern day Rocky Balboa in your own way. And I was wondering, how did the whole Pittsburgh Steelers thing happen? I'm a Baltimore Ravens fan, so I don't know how we're going to do this conversation today.
Well, listen, I have the utmost respect for the Ravens. So got to meet Ray Lewis a couple times, got to meet actually Terrell Suggs at an airport. And I had a Steelers hat on and he said to me, he goes, I can't escape you guys. Said to him, Terrell, listen, I'm a huge fan of defense. So I have such a great respect for the Baltimore Ravens because we're two very similar teams. How it came about, my family's from central and northwestern Pennsylvania. So though I grew up in the Philly area, my dad was an enormous Pittsburgh Steelers fan in the 1950s and 1960s. And then in the 70s, when they became a great squad, I got the honor of being able to see that team play live and got to meet some of those players.
Wow.
So for me, it was it's so amazing that you asked that question because it's such a cultural experience for me as to why I love this team. And it tracks back to my dad. And that's a whole story unto itself. My dad passed away when I was 18 years old. And he's a big piece of my story in fitness and then also in motivation. But that's the reason why. And going to games for me now is a very important piece, not only to share the legacy of my father with my son, but the team represents such culture. And it's tough. The NFL is not the same as it used to be. It was a very different type of league when I was growing up in the 70s and early 80s. And so, but yeah, it's actually cultural for me, where it's a community that was built. And that's the reason why it became that. So here I am living in Philadelphia as a Pittsburgh Steelers fan. And also I'm very good friends, Joe, with a lot of Baltimore Raven fans. I've been to Empty Bank Stadium a lot to see the Steelers play the Ravens. And I have so much respect for your head coach and the players on the Ravens. So very similar feel.
That's awesome. Well, you are one of the coolest Steelers fans I've ever met and known. That's incredible. Actually, I have a lot of respect for them too. And the fan base is everywhere.
Everywhere.
Even in Maryland, I've met a number of Steelers fans, and then now living in North Carolina, they're everywhere. So that's awesome. Well, I wanted to throw in that Philly thing. You have the toughness of Rocky Balboa, and then you also have the friendliness of the city of brotherly love, that Philly experience. When you say cultural, do you feel like that impacted how you interact with others?
Yes, I think first of all, I think Philadelphia gets a bad rap. I think that there's times where there's been some shenanigans by people in Philadelphia. But Joe, I gotta tell you, I've been to 9 NFL stadiums to watch the Steelers play, and there's always bad apples in every community, obviously. But
Mhm.
Philadelphia has a uniqueness about it. There's a friendliness that's maybe different from New York or Boston. So I really have a lot of respect for people in Philadelphia. But there is a tough edge. There is a tough edge. So I mean, that's the uniqueness. Now I live in the western suburbs. You would never know living where I live that we're 8 miles outside of a city of 4 to 5 million people. It's a
Wow.
wonderful suburb. It's beautiful. It's great to raise kids and everything like that. So but yeah, it's a combination. I think you bring to the table where you got to have a little bit of toughness, especially from the industry that we came from, Joe, and then
Yes.
also a softness and an empathy about you. And I think that's definitely there's regional things that go on with that. I've had some friends from Montana who said, "Yeah, we're not like that. We're not like that at all." So it's just interesting the way that it's come about and reputations and culture and community.
I love that. Well, I was thinking about you, and in the time that I've known you, we met over a decade ago, and I've always thought that you're one of the kindest, friendliest, most energetic humans I've ever met. I met you at a Parisi Speed School conference. There was certification training, and I saw you multiple times. And right away, you became an instant favorite for coaching. I loved learning from you, your passion, your drive. You were very approachable. Your resume is super impressive, and you could have your nose up in the air or keep people at arm's length, but you definitely have a servant's heart. I can tell that acts of service must be important to you because you lead by serving others. And I wanted to share with those that don't know about you just a little snapshot that you're an athlete, an elite sports performance coach, a multi-business owner, philanthropist, and motivational speaker. That's just some of the things that are on your resume. For those that don't know, could you share a little more about yourself, about your childhood, your athletic endeavors, and beyond till today?
Sure. Well, I mean, I was an undersized athlete all through middle school and high school, and chose to do multiple sports in college, and was really focused on developing myself as an athlete overall. Had some speed, Joe, so I was very blessed with that. There's the funny thing about speed. There's genetic potentiality of speed, and if you've got sprinters in your family and you're a sprinter, that's a unique subset of sports itself. And then you add other pieces of athleticism to it. I had to be tough, like you said, because I was small. So I had to be tough and fast and aggressive and smarter than everybody else on the field. And one of my idols when I was growing up was Walter Payton. And it's very unfortunate he died at a young age, but he would always say, "I'll be the first person to finish the first run in practice and the first person to finish the last run in practice." And that was the work ethic he had. And for people around this newer generation, in quotes now, Jerry Rice is a very similar kind of athlete where it was, he had to work very hard to get where he was. Well, I went through that, and in college just embraced just being an athlete and enjoying that whole process. And the funny thing, Joe, about my evolution with this is like I said, when I was 18 years old, right before my sophomore year in college, my father passed away of a massive heart attack. So my dad smoked 4 or 5 packs of cigarettes a day. He drank a lot, and that's partly one of the reasons I don't drink at all. And so that's a piece of me that's always been like that. And then he was in a high stress job, and I always track back this my in the end, and it kind of ties into when we're going to be talking later about things. It really wasn't any of that that killed my father. My father lost faith in himself. He lost confidence in himself, and he was afraid to move forward. And I didn't realize that until later in life, that was the reason why. But for me, what happened was I was going to go into the Marine Corps, be a Marine Corps officer, and go to law school, and that was the big plan. And then that got derailed right around Desert Shield and Desert Storm. and I went into fitness. I went into fitness. I had friends who were in the fitness world. Well, I was actually in the Nautilus world. So super slow to failure. I learned all that. So this is what you would do. You would count like 1, 2, 3, good job, 4, 5, and you'd coach people all day doing that. Literally, I mean, you could teach a baboon to do that, to count for people, and you wouldn't have to pay it. You just give it food. But I cut my teeth with some very impressive people, Joe. So in the Nautilus world, one of my mentors, Kevin Tolbert, was a coach with Jim Harbaugh from Stanford through the 49ers to Michigan. And he inspired me a lot, Kevin. And interesting, Kevin was one of the people about 1995, 96. He had said to me, Eric, maybe working with people on the main line of Philadelphia, where I live, Joe, the zip codes are almost dictionary because they're so wealthy. It is a very, very, some of the wealthiest zip codes in the country reside on the main line of Philadelphia. And we service all those people. But it's a difficult culture to deal with because they have a tremendous amount of money. And if you're somebody working for them, they look at it as especially when you're in your early 20s, you're just working for them.
Right.
And so that was one of the issues. And he said, why don't you get involved in training athletes? Well, I didn't know anything about that other than the fact that I was in sports. And so very interesting. I took a gamble, Joe, and there was a tennis coach I worked with named Eric Riley. He has Team Riley Tennis. He told me, I'll never forget this day. He goes, quit your job. I'll have 10 clients, 10 tennis players that you can work with within a
Wow.
week, like local junior tennis athletes. And Philadelphia is a hotbed for middle states tennis. These kids are
Really?
outstanding. So I did it. I took the chance. And then a week later, he says to me, he goes, all right, you have to cancel everybody. We're flying down to the Chrissy Everett Tennis Center. You're going to train one of the best tennis players in the world on her footwork.
Wow.
So I was like, okay, all right, okay. And really, Joe, I didn't really know what I was doing technically because sports performance at that point in the 90s. Now the parallel, because this, Bill was already formulating the Parisi speed schools during this time frame, but I didn't know that. So I was training, and I'll never forget the athlete. I'm not going to say her name because I just don't want to get into that, but she was a top-ranked tennis player in the world, and she freaked out about her footwork. She freaked out and said, I'm not good enough to beat these young athletic kids coming up. And it was kids like Venus and Serena that were going to be coming on the scene and blasting into the scene soon enough. And if you were not fast and strong, you weren't going to beat them. And so it made me start to think, wait a second, there's something here for athletes. There's something here. So how it ended up, I called the fitness editor for the Philadelphia Inquirer. His name was Art Carey. And I said, you want to write a story about my company? And he says, well, what do you train? Like, and I told him speed, and there's a pause, and he laughs on the phone. He says, you can't teach speed. So this is 1997,
Wow.
says this to me, can't teach speed. And I didn't talk to him. Well, something really cool happened in 97. ESPN broadcast the NFL Combine for the first time.
Wow.
And they broadcast it. Now, mind you, it was like 1 or 2 reporters. Now people pay money to go watch it, the NFL Combine.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I've trained guys that have gone to it, so it's pretty cool. He calls me, and you're going to laugh because it was a parallel. Bill Parisi, if you remember the story, drove around in a $500 van.
Yes.
Do you remember that, right?
Yes.
I'm driving around the suburbs of Philadelphia in a white Chevy Blazer packed with equipment, just like Bill was doing. I had hurdles, cones. Art Carey calls me, and I always laugh at this story. I had one of those phones. It wasn't even AT&T yet. It was Singular Wireless. You had to pull the thing down and pull the antenna up.
Yes.
And he says, hey, I want to write a story on your company. Meet me at Haverford College in 45 minutes and we'll do an article about you. And so I agreed. And Joe, I didn't have a company. I made it up on the way to the interview.
Really?
Because I just made it up. I called it Progressive Speed Training. And within 48 hours after the article came out, I had 72 phone calls from parents asking, how do you make my kid faster? You got to make my kid faster. And then jump to 2005, Bill Parisi contacted me I had a couple business partners. We put together our first Parisi Speed School. We were the third franchise in Parisi
Wow.
history.
Were you the
And
first one in Pennsylvania?
we were the first one in Pennsylvania, and we were in a gigantic sports complex, an old airport. They converted into all these fields and indoor fields.
Wow.
And so then in 2014, I became a master coach for Parisi, and that's when I went going out and doing certifications. Now, here's the other piece of it that if your listeners are talking about, if anybody has this thought, oh, it's great, it's all cherry blossoms and such an awesome thing. It's not always. It's a difficult business to be in. It's very
Mhm.
demanding. And I had some iterations of Parisi because I had bad partners. So I read people the wrong way for the longest time, Joe, and would always end up in a situation that could be, for an owner, very uncomfortable. But I was the honest one. So I was always the one taking, okay, well, I'm gonna keep this going. So I'm gonna make sure that it stays afloat no matter what happens. So for anybody, the industry is tough. Sports performance is tough. I'm not saying that people shouldn't do it. I'm saying be prepared for the idea that just because you have a passion for coaching kids doesn't mean it's going to be smooth all the way across the board, for sure.
I totally agree with that. The mental toughness needed in sports will help develop you for coaching. I know I worked at a number of gyms before I went to the Parisi Speed School. It was such a blessing and an answered prayer. I thought, what, something like this exists? This is incredible. I wish that I had done that in my playing days. And I played 3 sports in high school, college softball, and then went on to lifting competitions. I actually played tennis in high school, but the skills that I learned with the Parisi Speed School, all the training that you guys fed into us, that really helped me to teach athletes all the skills of athleticism. Because I coached high school softball, but that teaches them the skills of the sport, but not the skills of athleticism, the power, explosiveness, the strength, the footwork, all of that. So I loved the Parisi Speed School. I love that you are one of the OGs, that you were doing that and so bold. And your story about the mentor is incredible. It reminds me when I first started off as a personal trainer, my general manager at the time at the MAC in Baltimore was Jay Shiner, the former strength and conditioning coach for the Orioles. He was so kind to me. You actually remind me a lot of him, a lot of amazing traits where willing to feed fuel or motivate other people to reach their potential and their greatness. And he said, "You're not a personal trainer." And I said, "Wait, I'm not? I have some certifications." And he said, "No. You're not a personal trainer. You are a sports performance coach." And I didn't know about that at the time, but he said, "You're an athlete. You play sports. You like sports. You are going to train differently, work with athletes." And then he took me under his wing, and I got to work with him and some of the Baltimore Orioles players and get to learn some of that stuff. And that was a little bit of a glimpse of what I was going to learn with the Parisi Speed School. But I love that you were doing that. And there is a need. We're seeing the kids when they play sports, they don't have the conditioning to play their sport, or they need to prevent injury. They want to get faster in baseball or tennis or work on the footwork. So definitely, I think the combine going on TV and more people like you being trailblazers and showing the way, there's much more competition than there used to be. So the kids need this edge for the training.
Well, I think also, I always say this, and it's gotten worse since the pandemic. There's a crisis of confidence and beliefs in our youth now. So it's
Mhm.
very interesting you're talking about that. He was spot on with that statement. If I think about it as a trainer, trainers will impact the moment. Coaches impact lives way down the line into the other kids' adulthood. I can't tell you how many kids I've had who will return as adults with their own children, or they'll tell stories about, Joe, it's amazing. They call you coach still. So,
Oh,
so I,
yes.
I had an interesting story about that. I worked with a track team in high school outside of Philadelphia, Upper Darby High School, and I had athletes. So I was 22 years old coaching sometimes 17, 18-year-olds. And one of them, a young sprinter named Nate Hoey, now he and his wife are track coaches. I believe they're still in Vermont at a college. But now I think about it, I'm 57. They're only 4 years younger than me. And this is several years ago. I was in my late 40s and Nate called me and he said, "Hey, coach, I have a question about some maximal speed work." And at the end of the conversation, I said, Nate, okay, let's look at this. I'm 48, you're 44 years old. You don't need to call me coach. And he paused and said, "Yeah, I just can't not do it." So if you think about it, and something you learned in Parisi, so we always say this, that popularity is temporary, respect is timeless.
Mhm.
So coaches have a unique opportunity right now with a generation that is lacking, a generation that has no
Mhm.
belief right in themselves. They have a lack of confidence. If you can instill belief in a kid and change them culturally, that's the reason we coach. We don't coach to, well, we say this, we coach them to make, obviously, we're going to make them faster and stronger. There is no doubt about that. But the intangible is the key. If parents are looking for us to help them be something more than the parents can make their children, that's our job. And that's where I said, you don't have people walking around congratulating accountants. They may congratulate doctors, but coaches, like there's a certain level of respect. If it's a coach whose intention is really good, and you said it in the beginning, if you are service minded, you're
Mhm.
doing your job for the community. I believe with Parisi, there was a presentation at one of the summits that I had to do an entire thing on Parisi. What is the tapestry of Parisi? And tapestries are amazing. And it's so funny. If you look at a biblical reference to it, which I just found out, like, if you look at the tapestry is beautiful on the front, it's gorgeous, it's incredible. But if you look behind it and you look at the weaving and the intricacy of what it is, and it doesn't look terrific from the back, but it's the most important part of it, or it
Wow.
wouldn't look beautiful. And it's I was as I was learning that, listening to about tapestries, and that was the whole idea behind the Parisi. And I found it something unique. I studied a bunch of different cultures, Joe, across the world, and every single one was about storytelling, and every single one was about what do the stories do to make the next generation better than the previous one.
Wow.
And so I thought, wow, that's what we do
Mhm.
as performance coaches. We're really we're the backbone of that tapestry to help them, to guide them, to help them. And it is remarkable. A lot of parents really are struggling right now with it because they're looking at it going, well, I want to be my child's friend. I
Oh,
want to
for
be this. It's like, well, you're your mom and dad, like, but the kids need something a little bit more. And why not have an incredible positive influence on them? Just like you said, we didn't have sports performance on as a kid, you just ran around like outside. You just did that. So what a unique experience you had to have a coach do the same for you that I had coaches do for me. And that's
Mhm.
where I said, Joe, like I learned just as much from you in those interactions that you learned from me at
Oh,
the same
that's
time when we were coaching. It's true.
wow. That's incredible, and I love what you said about how it's hard for people to not say coach. I saw my high school softball coach last summer. She visited and got to meet my daughter, which was so powerful. They actually played catch, and it was neat. It was that next generation thing, and it was super powerful, but Coach Smith or Jean Smith, she's super important to me. I'll never forget all of the sacrifices she made to pour into my life. And I still have to say coach. It's hard. I'm a mother, but don't want to say her first name. And my high school tennis coach, Mr. Crizel, I still call him that. But they're so powerful. And recently, my daughter started playing soccer and run club. And every day she pretends to be one of her coaches. She'll say, I'm Coach Aaron or I'm Coach Allie, and she wants to copy what they were doing. And I thought, wow, she's 2.5 and she is copying her coaches. And it made me really think that that is one of the best jobs you can have. It's super fulfilling.
Completely agree. It truly is. And by the way, you never truly get away from being a coach. And for the audience out there, listen, you don't have to be a sport coach or a sports performance coach to be
Mhm.
a coach. If you're a parent, you're a coach. If you're a boss,
Yes.
you're a coach.
Mhm.
Whatever you do, you're coaching, because really coaching means taking someone from one place and taking them to a better place.
I
So
love that.
anybody the coach, like that's the great thing. I always encourage people to think like that.
Mhm.
And then also, this is the cool thing, Joe, that happens when you talk about service. And I'm a really big believer in service. That's why we're here, not just from the perspective of fundraising, which I'd love to do fundraising work, but also if you take young athletes and you give them the ability to be servant leaders as young athletes, you're going to change the dynamic of their entire community. And isn't that the coolest piece of this? That you've got kids that can now serve their communities. They might only be 12, 13 years old, but they have a service mind to them. My son has a service mind. And it's, I would like to hope that he saw me, the things that I do. Are we, none of us are perfect. Obviously, we do the best that we can, in God's eyes. But if we can model really well, our children will model well, and at least they'll start to learn how to serve better.
That is so beautiful. I know I mentioned the philanthropy work. I definitely want to hear more about what you've done and how you got into that. But that service mindset and teaching young athletes, that is so powerful and beautiful. I love that. I feel like in order to serve, you need to humble yourself. And if you are a humble athlete, you are going to go much farther than an athlete that's not serving. If you serve self, you don't get very far, but serving others, you're limitless. What made you get into that? Why is that such an important thing for you to teach?
Well, so my mom was a special education teacher for about 48 years. So
Wow.
she taught not only teaching, but she did career work for them for many years. And I think observing that and seeing that definitely gave me some kind of foundation as a youngster to see that,
Mhm.
hey, this is somebody who is serving people and not, it wasn't about the money with special education. It's kind of tough, but I think that's the model right there. It's watching what my mom was doing with special needs populations, and it just encouraged me to help others all the time. And it's funny, I've always been like that. Even as a teenager, I always wanted to help people as best I could. No, as best as a teenager could, and but here's the fact that if you can now take your experiences and lay it out to another generation, and hopefully teaching them a life skill that they're going to take with them to serve their community. What do we always say? It just takes one change, 1 degree of difference in your
Mhm.
community, and it makes a difference. Unfortunately, this society is they want to be human highlight reels and TikTok and all that stuff. But the reality is, like, how are you really changing? How are you really impacting people? And hopefully, from Parisi and what I've done, and through training for warriors as well, and in the years I was with them, that you are going to impact people to do something better for their community. So that's my philosophy.
Well, you're definitely living that out. I mean, the Parisi Speed School has a very special place in my heart. I moved away from Baltimore, where I was at LifeBridge Health and Fitness, and they had a Parisi Speed School inside of there. And some of my fondest memories come from working there. And I worked at a number of gyms. It was my favorite coaching experience. And I was so impressed with Bill Parisi. When I met him, I reading multiple books and just scouring the internet about him. When I met him, I couldn't believe how kind and approachable he was. He treated me like I was a big deal. And I just really love that. And there were a lot of great coaches at the training at corporate, but I have to say that I remembered you the most. And I think that your servant like personality and your kindness, but also you have so much passion and inspiration, and you're coaching in so many ways, like you said, not just sports, but as a father with family, friends. And we're going to learn more later in the episode about other types of coaching you're going to do. But thank you for doing that. And I was thinking, some people may not know what the Parisi Speed School is. Could you share to those who don't know what it is?
Yeah, so Parisi Speed School, I mean, now we can really say it's the cutting edge of all youth sports performance. You could name off different companies. There's no company like Parisi. So it really is for anybody out there. It's getting athletes to be in a better position for themselves through training, but also you're teaching life skills. So ultimately, they're learning linear speed techniques, which is acceleration and maximal speed. They're learning multi-directional speed, which is change of direction, agility, gain speed. And then there's a strength component to it, where you're teaching proper strength techniques and so that they understand the core lifts of the body. So it's a really important piece of youth development. And even tracking back strength training is important for kids as young as 5 and 6 years old. But if you're teaching it properly, they can pretty much do anything. But here's what I'll tell you about Parisi now. We are on the cutting edge of the science now of speed, fascial training, dynamic systems training. And it's become a serious science now where there's and Bill is spearheading it. But here's the cool thing, Joe, you mentioned about that. Bill's one of my really, really good friends. And it's over the years it's happened. I've broken bread with his family. When I've gone up to dinner with them and everything like that. That's exactly what you said. Bill is incredibly approachable, and it could be a new trainer, new coach in the network. It doesn't matter. His door is wide open. He'll tell people that. But here's what he's built. He built a system that not only trains kids but trains coaches.
Mhm.
So, for instance, me, and it's funny, Joe, like you're part of this. Every coach that I encounter is part of my family. So
Mhm.
I have coaches calling me, I have one coach who's from England who called just to talk about should she go out and start speaking, and I'm like, yes, go out and speak, like do embrace your passion.
Yeah.
Parisi is a big family.
Mm.
And we embrace that piece of it. But from a sports performance perspective, I would tell you, I don't know any other company that does what it does
Mhm.
for its coaches so that they can integrate culture into the training. So it's not just training. You're not just doing drills. You're learning. They understand when a jumpstart kid can tell you the focal points of acceleration. Pretty
Yes.
remarkable. It's pretty remarkable.
Oh, it is. I was so thoroughly impressed with the training and the gym that we were in at LifeBridge Health and Fitness. I would call it the Ivy League of gyms. They were so particular about trainers, and the interviewing process was so long. And my first boss, Hakeem Clark, I
I know
pestered
Hakeem.
him. Yes, he's incredible. And he just worked. We would have all these meetings, and he'd say, "Why are you doing that? Okay, try again, again, again." I felt like he was almost like a Mr. Miyagi of Parisi Speed School, and I couldn't believe how much I learned, and yet I had already learned so much. I still have more to go, but I grew a lot as a trainer and a person. And then Jason Kim, he went on to be a director, and Helen Whelan. The whole team, I couldn't believe how scientific and specific, and it was just it had to be the best. It was fun, but the best kind of training. And when I researched other organizations that might be similar, literally, it was just like they were reading a workout off of a piece of paper, and there was no science behind it. It was just move hard and fast and do 1,000 burpees. You could tire somebody out, but there's a difference between working on sports performance and other things. We're not trying to exhaust them necessarily. We want to make them better.
Well, it can't be about the coach's ego. And unfortunately, in our industry, there's a lot of ego-driven coaches. There's a lot of ego-driven programs. And I'd like to believe that Parisi, I mean, listen, we all clearly we're alpha males and females. So there's definitely going to be some personality egos and everything. But when you can check that at the door, and the real goal is to make kids better. And I would tell you, I would choose a coach who doesn't have necessarily a PhD or a master's in exercise science. But if I can bring a coach in that can communicate with kids, I can teach them anything, Joe. I can teach them anything as long as they can communicate with a child and get at their level and make them feel comfortable. Then
Mhm.
I'll take that coach and teach them and help them. And what I love about the program is, like I said, I do certifications all over the country. And I learn more from young coaches in a day. I'll go, oh, yeah, that's kind of cool. I think I'm going to have to bring that back to my coaches at my speed school because
Well,
I've never seen that before. So I like the innovation of Parisi and the flexibility of Parisi now. But hey, listen, the first day when you do certification, the first day is focused on culture. We'll ask questions to the coaches and say, did you have a negative or a positive experience as a youth with a coach? How did that shape you? And we've had people cry
yes.
and like, I mean, it gets very emotional. And you cannot tell me that your story is not more important than, say, Bill Parisi's our overarching story of having a $500 van. Your community, it's more relatable about you. So while you'll tell the history of Parisi, Parisi affords you the opportunity to tell your story. And Bill is really, really big on it. In fact, I'm speaking Friday night, next Friday in Scottsdale for the Parisi Summit, and my
Oh,
entire
really?
guys, and I'm going to record it and everything. It's all about. It's going to be called the light of coaching. They are the light of coaching. I'm going to tell the story of the four candles with that. That's a very powerful, powerful, inspirational story because it relates back to that they're the last candle standing and they can relight all the other candles of hope, faith, love. Like that's what a coach does have to do. And if you do that, and that's why I said coaching's not just coaching people to be better athletes, it's coaching people in life. And I really, I really believe in fact, more so now even, that coaches are the light of our society right now. Because you're igniting somebody's motivation, their belief in themselves, and that's important.
Oh, I completely agree. I believe everyone needs a coach. Kind of like maybe in some ways everybody needs therapy at some point. You get some sort of objective viewpoint from someone to help you be healthy, but a coach, we all need that. And you also mentioned training for warriors. Can you share a little bit about that for those who don't know?
Yeah. So another good friend of mine in the Parisi system, Martin Rooney, he branched off and was doing something called training for warriors, which originally it seemingly was for mixed martial arts fighters, for ultimate fighting people. And I got to actually see some of them train. But I'll never forget, Martin took my staff during one of the certifications. We went up to the smaller gym in Fair Lawn, New Jersey. We were training this thing called a hurricane. And I'll never forget, I said to him, "So you're leaving, aren't you? You're going to do," and he was like, "What? No, no." So no, 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 no. And he branched off and started training for warriors, which is more for adults. And it was very symbolistic. The Colosseum was its symbol. Lions were all over the symbolism of it. And I was literally the first license ever in training for warriors. And
Wow.
and I didn't know that I was the longest tenured one. And it was for adults. It was training for adults, and the motto was lift heavy and sprint. But it had a lot of Parisi behind it because Martin was the educational director of Parisi. The level of motivation that he would bring to the table was remarkable. And again, it was another subset away from kids. I was working with adults and everything. But what I really embraced, Joe, was the culture of it. Into the roar was one of our sayings. It's the story of lions and everything. And we would have these awards that would you'd get these lion heads. In fact, I still have it. I still have the lion head. That was
Oh,
one of our awards. And the award was I got the Nächstenliebe Award. That's a German word for loving your neighbor more than yourself. And the reason being, and this ties in, I started doing fundraising for children that were victims of shaken baby syndrome about 2014. And here's why. We had an incident in our local town that it happened to a child who was killed by his stepfather.
mm.
And so I was driving in the car and I heard that it was a local radio station talking about that there was a memorial service coming up. Joe, I don't know what happened. I got off the ramp, turned around, got back on the highway and went right to the church. I didn't even think about it. And I wanted to be a part of that. And then from then I started raising money for these children. What happened was somebody said, "Oh, there's a child in Greenville, South Carolina. You might want to look into this case." Now, I don't know these people, didn't know who they were. I organized an entire training for warriors, warrior workout fundraiser for this child at a training for warriors Parisi in South Carolina, Greenville, South Carolina. I wanted to do it in Charlotte. And I talked to Martin. He goes, "Well, why don't you just do it at the one in Greenville?" I said, "I didn't even know we had one in Greenville." So that started to kind of snowball with that. I'm no longer in training for warriors, only because of circumstances, changing gyms. We're literally right next to a CrossFit, so I can't do adult training in the Parisi we're currently in. It's fine. I have great memories. I learned a great deal about people, got to meet people from all over the world that are in training for warriors. It's in like 30 some countries.
Oh,
So
wow.
yeah, so it's pretty remarkable. But here's the thing. If you look at everything, is all built on culture. So every class we did story time. There would be stories, and as a coach, and I implore anybody that's a coach or anybody that is an aspiring coach or is a fitness trainer, incorporate storytelling with your client base. Believe me, they want to hear it. Believe me, they want to be motivated. Even my NFL Combine guys at the end of their sessions would be like, "Are we done?" I'd go, "Yeah," and they'd be like, "Whoa, whoa, no, we're not. You got to do story time." So there was always stories. And by the way, guys, this find a story. Go on the internet and look at a story. I'm a huge Amelia Earhart just fascinates me. And the story behind Amelia Earhart and the motivation, how motivating she really was, like, that's a story. You can find Aesop's fables. Those are great fables to tell, not only the adults, but the kids, because at the end of your session, you want impact. Not just, did you learn about the wall drive today? No, you want to say to them the story, tell them of the story about water, the boiling point of water. And that it's that while 212 degrees, that's where water boils and it forms steam and creates power. 211 is hot,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not boiling. And so we ask the kids and the adults, even adults, what's the difference? And they'll say it's 1 degree. And you'll say, yes, that's all you need. 1 degree change. You don't need to be, it doesn't have to be 1,000,000 degrees. It is funny when you ask kids, like, what's the boiling point of water? I had one girl, she's like, it's 5,000 degrees. I was like, no, that's the surface of the sun, but okay. Okay. But I think that that's when you incorporate those stories and you relate it back, and they can be incredibly powerful stories. So if you don't mind me sharing, so I was doing a Parisi certification in Virginia Beach, and it was about a week after the shooting at the courthouse in Virginia Beach. Waring's Gym is a very famous gym in Virginia Beach. They brought me in. I had no idea that they were doing a fundraiser for the community, for the people in that, and that there were people in the workout that had to crawl over their friends' bodies to get to the SWAT people evacuating them out of the courthouse. They were members of the gym. I had to get up and they said, can you please lead off our training or finish up our training? And I got up and I did a whole thing I said the starfish story and how you have to get into your community to promote healing and everything. And if you promote healing, that doesn't matter what horror comes into your community. If you promote healing through community, you're going to be that much better. And like for me, that was one of the most emotional speeches I was ever a part of, because when I realized that there were people in the audience that had experienced it, but that they trusted me, Joe, to get up and do that speech. And that was, they had it at a Parisi and a TFW. And it just matched up so well with the message that you're giving people of hope, right? Hope and faith and love. Like, that's what coaches do.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's what we do. So it was that the Training for Warriors ride was fantastic. I have a lot of great friends from it. And it's helped me become a better coach, a better father, a better partner, a better whatever it might be.
Wow. That is powerful. You are definitely a born leader. God has wired you for incredible leadership in many areas. And I'm excited for people to learn more about the other ways that you're leading. Whew, that got me. And
Yeah.
the Amelia Earhart mentioning that made me think, did you say that you were a military buff, like a military history buff
Yes.
at some point?
Yes. My
Mhm.
major was military history and international relations. So very fascinated by and my uncle served. My uncle was a 5th Engineer Marine on Iwo Jima. So he was a Marine, and luckily, I got to experience the stories of my uncle telling me the stories about what happened on Iwo and what it was like to be from a small Pennsylvania town, going from there to California to Guam, to back to Hawaii, then Hawaii, and then to jump off point at Iwo Jima. And to hear those stories, and I have a memoir he wrote that about his experiences, and I have maps of Iwo Jima that he took from Japanese officers. So I have that stuff. It's pretty incredible. So yeah, so military histories, I'm fascinated by it.
Well, you're an excellent storyteller and well-spoken. You have a very good vocabulary. I enjoy hearing you speak. I think I'm going to start calling you General. So, General, I did want to segue a little bit into how do you stay fit? Because in order to be a trainer, you need to be in great shape. But I have to say, working for Parisi Speed School, it was so physical. I would have a Fitbit on and track my steps, and it was easily over 20,000 steps a day. I'd be super sweaty, have to change a lot. You're demonstrating a lot. And there's a lot of activity. How do you stay so fit and maintain
Sure.
your fitness?
Well, funny you should ask that. So I took took my Parisi Speed School when I was 36 years old, and promptly, because I was still sprinting. I was still running sub 11 in the 100. I was running about 10,
Wow.
70, 100 at 35, 36 years old. but our bodies are not well designed for high impact direction change past the age of 35, probably. And I blew both knees out doing high speed testing. I'll never forget this. I was doing a 5-10-5 demo, Joe, and one of the girls I was testing, I was showing her the 5-10-5, came off the line, hit the plant, and all of a sudden she goes, "Ew, what was that?" She goes, "Was that your leg?" And
Oh,
I said, "Yeah, it was my leg." So I ripped all the articular cartilage in my right knee, did it in my left knee as well. And then I had 2 microfracture surgeries where what they do is they auger, they drill 9 holes in your knee, and then it bleeds into the joint and forms a super clot, and it becomes scar tissue after non-weight bearing. Well, that's fine and good. It's not cartilage. So what do you think I promptly did? I sprinted and I lifted and I did demolish my knees. So when I was 48 years old, I had my first knee replacement,
mhm.
and then at 51 had a second knee replacement. So when you're asking about that, yes, fitness, I was way ahead of schedule because I was already fairly fit. But I, it's funny you're talking about this now. So up until about I'd say 8 weeks ago, 6 weeks ago, no, 8 weeks ago, I was struggling with even my weight. Outwardly, you look at me and say, he's in great shape. He trains. I was still training. I was training properly. I was doing everything, but I want everybody to think about this: 5'8", 199 pounds.
Mhm.
So I could lift a lot of weight, but I wasn't hardly doing any cardio anymore. So here's what I did. I made a commitment. I made a big change. I started training differently because I was training a lot of heavyweight work and everything like that. I've changed my style because guys, I can't sprint anymore. So for the longest time, I identified as that. So I've changed my style. I have a love-hate relationship with the air assault bike now.
Oh,
Uh,
yes.
so I can do that. I can still move though, and I'll tell you why I can still move. And you're still, even with knee replacements, you're allowed to do active stuff. I dropped. I'm at 183 pounds now, 8 weeks later. And the reason why is I changed my entire nutrition, sleeping better, eating better, and training differently. So when you're asking about staying in shape, it's really making a different level of commitment, especially at my age now at 57, that I thought I was in great shape. I thought I was. I wasn't. And now that also ties into I was a little empty spiritually. And the moment I engaged there, it literally changed my life. So for me, the fitness piece now I would say yes, Joe. You asked me how I'm staying in shape. I'm being smart. I'm being smart across the board now. So for anybody that's out there, listen, don't stop. They, it, if I'm a young trainer and I'm working many hours, or if I'm a young coach, I'm working many hours. If you don't carve out time for you, you're making a colossal mistake, both mentally and physically, because you're going to blink, you're going to be 40, and you're going to say, "Uh-oh, I'm overweight and I don't feel good about myself." So don't stop. Even through injury, whatever injuries, and you will get injured. Let's just say that you're going to if you're active. You have to figure out, okay, what do I remove and or add in my fitness regimen and change it. Don't do the same things over and over again. You have to change it. And if you change it, you're going to do very well. Now, I'm an extreme case, 2 knee replacements, but I'm able to do a lot of stuff. You'd be surprised.
Oh, I can tell. I remember seeing you at corporate, the way you were moving, very physical. I love that you wouldn't ask somebody to do something you don't do yourself.
Correct.
And I had coaches growing up where if you looked at them and how they moved, you couldn't tell that they played sports. Life happens, there could be injuries, but as much as possible, like you said, don't stop. I love the quote. I think it goes, don't let what you can't do keep you from doing what you can do. And so I love that you pivoted. Pivot is a big thing. I know in your other interviews, pivoting in life and learning to adapt and switch gears and find out what's right. And for those who are listening on the podcast and they don't see you, you're jacked. You've got a lot of muscle. You're very strong, fast. And honestly, I think you were so fast, you just ran out of your tendons and ligaments.
That's so funny. That's so funny. Yeah, it's a long time ago, but here's the thing now. I'm okay with where I am now. I'm okay with the fact that the things that I can do now that are different from what I used to do. And that's where I said, like, be very careful if you're an athlete or a former athlete who's become a coach or pull away from the idea that you identify as what you did.
Mm.
So, I'll tell you a funny thing. It's, and you're as a Baltimore Raven fan, you'll love this. So Chuck Noll, head coach of the Steelers in the 70s and early 80s, he would bring players in when it was time. So when we're talking about future Hall of Famers, he would bring them into his office and when it was time to stop, and he would say, listen, you need to move on with your life's work.
Wow.
Football doesn't define you. You need to, you can't play anymore. So after, 11 years of playing, you need to go to your life's work. And I always, that quote that struck me, that he would say that to these athletes, and you think, well, wait a minute, weren't they doing their life's work? Now that's not what the sport you play is, not your life's work. And so a lot of coaches will roll into, say, the Parisi Speed School, and they'll say, well, I'm a football player. I'm a basketball player. You're not, you're a coach. Like, start to think like that, as opposed to identifying yourself as this, because you'll be very sad and very depressed if you just continuously identify as something you once were. And so it's good to talk about. It's fine. That's your background, but that's not who you are.
Yeah, I thought about even saying I am, as in, I believe kind of the once an athlete, always an athlete. That spirit is there, so I'll have that. But even now, after overcoming cancer and emergency C-section, multiple surgeries, I even had to adjust the yoke. We're actually selling our yoke because I kept thinking, with scoliosis and some of the back issues, it may not be wise right now to continue putting that kind of load on my spine. And I want to have longevity and great health. But I'll still tell myself I'm still an athlete. But for now, yes, I'm going to identify with who Christ says I am, who God says I am, and go from there.
I'll have to agree with that. It's more like a warrior mentality than anything else.
Yes.
Yeah, than anything else. That's what it's what you represent, which is pretty remarkable, Joe. And I mean, that's the thing that, you do represent warrior tendencies. I mean, listen, to survive cancer, C-sections, to survive a sibling passing away, like, that's warrior stuff, Joe. That's what it is. I mean, it is, and that's a remarkable piece of what God gave you. I really believe that, and that you can serve in that way with the obstacles or tragedies that have befallen you. We all have them, but it's the response you have, or what your faith is from that does make a difference.
Oh, definitely. And any good that came out was all by God's grace. All glory, honor, and praise to Him. And speaking of God and faith and the power of that, I'd love to hear more about your journey. I have to say, you have the fingerprints of God all over you. And I thought that when we met that, oh, there's something really different about him. There's a light. Can you share kind of where you were and some recent exciting news in your life?
Yeah, I mean, I have a very interesting background. My family's it's two split religions. My mom's side of the family was Jewish, Joe, and my dad's side of the family was Baptist. My parents met in college, and we weren't really raised religiously. We weren't really raised anything. We kind of had I would say, just a secular existence. And so think about this for everybody in the audience. I'm 57, and now this is the big thing. So that I didn't really I believed in a higher power. I just didn't know what. I wasn't. What's the saying? I didn't know what I didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I was. And I was had a marriage that failed, and there was a lot of reasons why. Got a wonderful child out of it, which is really great. And then was in it the past 8 years. I was in a relationship with my girlfriend Karen, and I have no problem saying her name, and it's all right, I say. And that kind of collapsed January 13th of this past year, and it kind of collapsed. And my response to it, because we didn't talk for 30 days, and it was a diametric change in my life. But within 48 hours, Joe, something said to me, and it had to be God, you got to write this letter to her. Write the letter, and then when you guys talk, read her the letter.
Mm-hmm.
Like, read it with with everything she brought up as to what was going on in our relationship. And I'd lost my fire. That was the main piece of it. I'd lost my fire with work, and people might not be able to believe that because we're talking about it, but it's true. Like, that's what happened. And so we didn't talk. And then essentially February 13th, a month later, she told me, she said, "We're done." And I said, "Nope, I don't agree with that. Let me read you this letter. Let me read this." I read her the letter. It was very emotional. It was a very emotional situation for me. I rarely shed tears. I did that time, the entire letter.
Oh, wow.
So did that. And she said, I didn't expect this. This is not what I expected. Because I think she expected me to say, either beg or just say, "Okay, whatever, whatever." And she's had a lot to think about. So we're trying right now to repair it. It's going to take a long time to repair, but I'm patient with faith, and this is how it's going to tie in. February 15th, I'm sleeping, and it's Saturday morning. I jolt awake at 4:30 a.m. And I have some good friends who know Steve Furtick's church in Charlotte and got baptized down there. And I just felt this presence. It was Christ. And I had to jumped on the website, took the prayer of baptism. And from that point on, I pray every morning and every night. Every morning and every night. But 4:30 a.m. I've been getting up at 4:30 a.m. every day since February 15th. Now,
Wow.
since then, Karen and I have talked, and at first I wanted to get baptized at Elevation, but she said, "Why don't get baptized at my church, her church in her town?" And so we're trying to work the details of that out to get baptized there, and it's changed my life.
Wow.
My focus has changed. I've started a new business as a result of it, and it is literally that moment where I accepted Jesus, that I changed everything. And it's just such a calming feeling. And even when you start to have human emotion and I get anxiety or anything like that, I can trust and lean on him because I can pray and ask. And that's been, I can't even explain both the emotional and rational depth of it
Wow.
that I experienced. And here's what I'll tell you. I'm writing a book. It's dedicated to Karen, because she was through God. She's the switching point. She was the pivotal point that had she not done that. So I don't know if we would be sitting here having this conversation.
Wow.
And so I owe a lot of gratitude to her that she guided me towards that. Where our relationship ends up, I don't know. It's okay. It's not my plan. It is God's plan. Forcing it would make no sense. And so, but it's an amazing experience that all of a sudden this program that I built is going to come to fruition. And it's obviously it's God first.
Yes.
But through Karen, it motivated me to make some changes as to what I wanted to do in my life.
Wow. So she was the catalyst that led to all of it, planting the seeds. And it's amazing. We don't want pain and suffering, but it seems to be a lot of times our greatest teacher. And I love how in the book of Romans, it says that God works everything out for our highest good. And so he can use that pain. Not everything is necessarily good, but good can come from it. And it's so inspiring how you're using a time where you felt lost and in the wilderness and everything's collapsing around you, then to embrace Jesus is so powerful. And speaking of coaching, Jesus is the ultimate coach.
You got that right. I agree. I completely agree.
Wow. And it kind of reminds me like a modern day Apostle Paul story. He was blinded on the road to Damascus, and then I was blind, now I see. And then he was able to see and became a great believer. In a way, it was like there was that blinding and now you see. And it's really cool that you've got this brand new chapter in your life. I'm sorry for the pain, but it sounds like you're using that for good to start a new business. Can you share what the new business is?
Yeah, so a day after that revelation for me, I created something called the Tsunami Effect Coaching, and what it is for adults, high performing adults, in the business world, in the sports world, in everyday life, that if they don't see the ripples of, I said, the ripples of fear, anxiety, frustration, and depression. It's
Mhm.
those small ripples, which if you think of a tsunami, that's where they start. There's a great disturbance. There's a mass amount of energy, but you don't really see it at the source. It's very small until it starts to approach your shoreline. And I use that as the example of your subconscious and conscious mind, that's the shoreline. And by the time the tsunami hits, you're in a state of depression. You, you're immobile. You can't do anything. And as these tsunamis crash ashore, it's not just one wave, it's multiple waves. It
Mhm.
also then, this after the first wave, there's debris everywhere, which is smashing into you at the same time. What I want in my coaching business now is for these people to recognize the ripples before they become tsunamis.
Yes.
Or if they are tsunamis, how do you create citadels to protect yourself in?
Mhm.
And I think that's an important piece of this. And from that, literally the moment I had this religious experience, everything started to flow. The connections started to flow. I started to reach out, and I had one person reach out and they said, "You have to write a book." And I found a publishing company that is independent publishing, and it's amazing what they're doing to
Wow.
to to get this book written. And again, like I said, through God, Taryn triggered this. And I'm building an entire business that's very different from what I did, yet not, because I'm still a coach and I'm still motivating people, but at a different level now. And that's the wonderful thing about it. So creating the tsunami effect. I mean, think about it. Everybody, somebody asked me, they're like, why the tsunami? I said, I'm fascinated by tsunamis, number one. I said, and also I'm living it.
Mhm.
I've experienced January 13th, I had a pretty large level of wave train come at me, multiple waves from a tsunami hit me. And I chose to defend my shoreline and galvanize and recognize going forward. I
Mhm.
said fear, anxiety, frustration, and depression. And now I have God on my side too, which is a pretty
Mhm.
remarkable. So think about this, Joe. Like I'm a recent believer. So for me, it's pretty remarkable to see like all of a sudden, but no thought process of, oh, I wish I had done I wish I had recognized earlier. I wish I said no, I wouldn't have known. I wouldn't have known back then.
I love that. No guilt. And guilt doesn't come from God. So that would be the enemy attacking you anyways. And it really sounds like the parting of the Red Sea. Things are happening. It seems super fast when you were telling me about things and how it's coming into play. And I'm curious to know what client would be interested in this. Who could this help? It sounds like it would help everybody on the planet.
Yeah. I mean, you're coming at like a lot of times. So high performer, that's a funny word because anybody could be a high performer, a stay-at-home mom, a school teacher, a CEO. I actually have a friend who's a CEO of a big tech company, and he said, Eric, because this is incredible. He said all CEOs should have two people on their speed dial for their phone. One is a therapist, and two is their life coach. He said because that they don't want to show where their pain points are. They're afraid to show that because they don't want society to see that. So I would say anybody really that would consider themselves high performers that are struggling and suffering from this internal battle. Because here's what I'll tell you, Joe, this is what happens. If you don't recognize those ripples and they do become tsunamis, your health goes, your relationships go, and then your career goes. And I'm saying career last because if the other two go, your career can't stay afloat
Right.
because you lose your health and you lose your relationships. I mean, I look at it like my health is for me resetting my health, potentially resetting a relationship, right? The foundation's got to be rebuilt, and then career wise, making a diametric shift away from sports performance.
Mhm.
Now, somehow I'll always be involved at some level, but
Yeah.
the day to day coaching, I think, is again look at it from this perspective, pass it off to a younger generation.
Mhm.
Can we build coaches that are going to be just as motivating, just as culturally uh, built around this? So, what do I envision? I want to speak on a large stages. I want to be able to speak to people getting up on stage and talking to them and spreading this message. That's a very important piece that I might not be able to act on today, but I'm building the foundation. And that word has really become such a mantle for me, foundation. And it's funny, Joe, Karen said to me, you can't make substantial change overnight. I said, you're right. Substantial change happens forever. You're always changing, but you can build foundations and rebuild foundations fairly quickly.
Oh, definitely. And I love that you can help people that are struggling, that are in the storm. You can help people where they're starting to see, hints of it, but you can also help people prevent it. I try to share with my daughter there are things that we can do to prevent potential pain. And some things you're not able to prevent, but what you can prevent, go for it. And I love the quote, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So
For
you can
sure.
feed into people. And a lot of people think, I'm not having issues with this, that, or the other. But unfortunately, one thing that we can expect is in the world, we will have trouble, but God has overcome it. And he has overcome every trouble and gives us the victory. But we need the tools. And it sounds like you're providing tools. And isn't it a course? Is it 5 weeks?
It is. It's a 5-week course online that I'm actually launching April 14th. And I'll get all the information out to you and as to what that looks like at some point. And also the website's developing too. So that's just starting. Like you said, it's happening fast.
Yes.
And I have 2 chapters already completed the book. And the third one I'm going to start working on tomorrow. And it's been an experience. And the book will tie in to future courses that I'm going to offer as well. And so that's an exciting piece of this.
So General Eric University. Yeah. But I love that you've got the courses, the coaching, the books. I also love your social media. I stalk you. Actually, this morning I thought, okay, I want to get pumped. I want to run through a wall. Let's see what would help. So I went on your Instagram, Coach Eric Mitchell, and I love listening to your wisdom, your advice. I just felt so pumped up. I think even my daughter was like, whoa, what, did you drink a pot of coffee? I'm like, no, it was Coach Eric Mitchell.
I appreciate that. And that's the thing about the social media stuff. It for me, it's about how to just get the message out to motivate people and make them feel, I always say this, you want to be a part of something bigger than yourself. And if you can do that at every level, and that's where I said, today's message is about, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Where are you looking spiritually? Where are you looking with your relationships, your career? And if everyone just takes a deep breath, steps back and looks at those pillars, those areas of your life you want to see change, you got to make some decisions. And I'm available. Listen, your audience, anybody wants to talk to me, I want them to reach out. Because I'm gonna contact all of them if they do. So that's a big piece of this as well. It's that it's a community, and how do we foster community? We support each other.
Wow. And your reach is global now. You can help people all over the world.
Yes, very different than being in the confines of a sports performance center.
Yes.
Yeah.
So when people like Simon Sinek or Elon Musk or Bill Gates or whatever, they're having you speak for them, can I say that I know you and that we work
100%.
together? Will you still remember me?
You have to come and speak with me.
Oh, I love it. That's awesome.
Yeah, you have to be part of the system.
That's awesome. Wow. I have goosebumps. I'm so inspired by you, motivated. And I was mentioning to you earlier that my husband, Matt, overheard one of our conversations and he made this vision board and he had all these things on this vision board. And then the next day he said, oh, I accomplished this, 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 and this. And I thought, what? Those are things you've been wanting to do for years. What happened? And he said, oh, well, I overheard your talk with Eric and it was really motivating. I loved how he dove in and he's making things happen, grab the bull by the horns. And it's also not haphazard. You're doing it strategically. And so you already made an impact and he wasn't even talking to you.
Well, that's the highest honor I could hear from Matt. Like that's the highest honor I can hear. And you know what's amazing about it though too? Well, first of all, the next book I'm thinking about is going to be like ultimately our partnership starts with God. So if God's your partner, ultimately, that's almost like that's the next book talking about the partnership with God that you have to establish. Because if you don't do that, I don't think you can build the foundation of anything else. And so that's an important part for me. But you see what I mean by that community? Like already, like the effect, when you say that to me, that motivates me even more. But, listen, I hired a coach who is a very good friend of mine who is in Florida, who is motivating me. He's got me going along his program. That's the reason I'm able to coherently put things together. And I love it because he tells me, he's like, did you do this? No. Well, why didn't you do this? Let's go over why you didn't do it. Let's go over the pieces of it. So anybody out there, if you need a coach, you got to hire a coach.
Yes.
You got to hire a coach. And there's a monetary value to it. And if you put a monetary value to it, you'll follow through on it. And I learned that. And for me, it's, this is where I am right now. And I said that in the beginning, I'm going to, the first 15 people in the program, I'm really going to give a steep discount for the first 15 people in my program, but I know the worth of it. Yes. And I know the worth, and so eventually it's going to get to the point where it's going to be like, significant, but it doesn't matter because I think people look at it and go, I need to invest in me. And that's just like, we if we don't invest in ourselves, we're in big trouble.
Exactly.
And here's what I'll tell you. Here's why, which I've learned. God invested in you.
Oh, amen.
That's why. So we should do it because the expectation is we're built for greatness. We are built for greatness and we have to do these things to be great. And so it gets me charged up when I hear that you were talking, like that Matt said, like, oh, I'm so excited. Like, I love that because it shows you that the impact that you have on people is great and it affects you too. It motivates you even further. So that's awesome.
Yeah, it was incredible. He actually got certified as a CrossFit coach and wanted to do that for 12 years. And then after that talk, he was signed up, ready to go. He did it. And he keeps saying, I can't believe I did it. I can't believe it. It's been over 12 years. I've wanted to, but you already helped from afar and you are just going to do even greater and bigger things. And I love what you said. Basically, we are God's masterpiece. Ephesians 2:10 talks about it, and we are loved, chosen, wanted, and we are worthy of good things, and God wants us to love ourselves. And one of the most loving things you can do is invest in yourself. In this coaching, wow, I'm super excited for all the people you're going to help. How can people reach you?
Well, I think right now the easiest way, social media is great. I mean, they can, Coach Eric Mitchell on Instagram seems to be where people are really reaching out to. It's the same. It's Eric Mitchell on Facebook. There's a segment of the population that loves to use Facebook, some that likes to use Instagram.
Yeah.
But I will tell you this, listen, if anybody ever wants to email me, they can. It's easy. It's coachericmitchell@gmail.com. So simple. And they can definitely contact me. When the Tsunami Effect Coaching website comes out, I'll share that with you. So that you can, if you want to be able to tell people this is where it is, this is what it's about. There'll be more things on the Tsunami Effect coming out very shortly, which is exciting. But like all the social media stuff, I just started this, so it's really getting cranked up now. So that's pretty exciting. But I'm an open book. If people want to contact me and talk to me, I would love to engage in conversations with people. And they can certainly check out all the Tsunami Effect coaching videos up on Instagram for sure.
That is awesome. Thank you for all that you're doing. Thank you for joining us today. This was a real treat. It was the treat for me. Pumped.
It was the treat for me.
Oh,
it really was.
Well, thank you. And for those of you listening, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day. Please subscribe to the show, hit the notification bell, comment, share it, just tell everyone possible about it because this show is bringing light to a world of darkness and we need more encouraging stuff like this. So thank you. God bless everyone.
Thank you so much for listening to the Strong by Design podcast. If you found value in today's episode, please subscribe so that more people can find out about our show. Plus, you don't want to miss any future episodes with the amazing guests and topics we have lined up for you.